Welcome to The World Today. I'm Waqas Majeed Khan. Today's topic is actually about revealing the true face of India. What we've been witnessing in the past couple of days that the Indian authorities have been up to, especially not just in Kashmir, but also across the mainland India. 7 people have been killed, all belonging to India's lowest castes, the Dalits, as they were leading protests against a court ruling which further discriminates against them. And that is just one of the things that are symbols of what Shining India is really all about under the BJP and Modi establishment. Let's begin the conversation. I'd like to introduce my guests in the studio. Joining me for this discussion today, we've first of all got Raja Qaisar with us, and along with him we have Qamar Cheema. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. Raja Sahab, I'd like to start with you. We've been talking a lot about the world not looking at India's atrocities in Kashmir. And now we are seeing India or the BJP Modi government really revealing itself in its true colors when we see the murder of innocent protesters all across India, from Madhya Pradesh to Rajasthan to UP. Every state is now witnessing the kind of mayhem that is being unleashed by the Modi government. What do you think about that, sir, and what would you like to say?
Well, thank you, Waqas. It reminds me back to 1944, the famous speech of Winston Churchill, when he said that USSR has established an iron curtain between the Eastern Europe and the rest of the world. So likewise has been done by India. You know, it has successfully made an iron curtain between the rest of the world and India in itself, and particularly Kashmir. India is in a constant denial, and plus the consternation which is going and sweeping across the entire India, which is becoming a rife phenomena, and you can see it throughout the states, and this is not the first incident. Before this we had been witnessing many atrocious events of cow vigilantism. They were also quite atrocious and very condemnable. India, what is wrong with India right now is that India has made an outright drift into a Hindu jingoism. For past 4 years, with this saffron tide and with this BJP's victory into the mainstream, India is experiencing a transition. India is experiencing a transition, and to what is even more frightening and scaring is that it's a retrogressive transition. It is not something which India is moving ahead, and India is trying to act as a mature power, and supposedly India claims itself to be a major power, or a rising power, or a rising economy. But what India has failed to understand is that with the rising status or with the rising power, there comes more onus and more burden of the responsibility. India's media projection, which always had been very preposterous and which had been always on the stage, had been there, but India is not ready to recognize that transition which it is going through, and it is still hostage to a kind of a narrow-minded parochial Hindu nationalism, and rightly adumbrated as Hindutva. The way it is ruling India, it has made a quantum leap forward in a way that India now stands probably as the most virulent, violent, and as at the same time a very hostile and a bellicose nation towards its minorities, towards the rest of the ethnicities. And India, being a greatly heterogeneous country, is, I believe, playing with fire, because this kind of pursuit of policies may lead to an internal implosion. Because you see, very recently, if you had been following the news, since I had been a reader on Indian politics for quite a long, there was the leader of All India Anna Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam, which is the ruling party in Tamil Nadu, had asked the rest of the states of India to join hands together to get secession from Indian Federation. So, and he urged them that we all should put our hands together and we should get separation from India. Then you see that northeast of India, the 7 sisters, Nagaland, Mizoram, Tripura, Sikkim, they are also under an incessant consternation for past quite a long, in fact, long years. If you see, and I could call up rightly if I am, it was back in 2011 when Manmohan Singh on the floor of the Lok Sabha admitted that India has failed to ensure its writ towards the northeast part of India. Then you see towards the north of India, coming towards the north of India with Kashmir and Himachal, you see again the problem, and then you can see an outright insurgency against the Indian occupation, and India is not ready to feel the heat. What is India like? For instance, right now, this cow belt, which this Delhi, Chandigarh, and Haryana, and this mainstream of India. Probably this is only the comfortable, and this is only the serene India right now. Rest
Not
of
even them, sir. There are sporadic.
Apparently, they seem stable, or as the face of the India. But India is huge and humongous as far as its territory is concerned, and spans from Myanmar to the Ladakh. So we need to realize this fact, and India. And this is the high time where Pakistan should, project this.
I think more importantly, and I would like Qamar Cheema Saab's input in this. Cheema Saab, the world community is again silent. Now this is where when we talk about the human race in the world today, we talk about equality, we talk about freedom, we talk about respect for rule of law and humanity. These are the guiding principles of the human race going into the 21st century. And what we're seeing in India is a negation of all these values. These values are held very closely to the Western powers' heart. In fact, truly, for every right-thinking, logical human being would hold these close to his heart, these perceptions. But unfortunately, we've seen a regression, as Raja Saab has also pointed out, within India. There was a time during the Congress-led government that the Economics Affairs Minister said that India needs microchips, not potato chips, from the rest of the world. How far have we come from that sort of an outlook that the Indians used to have? Now we have people breaking solar panels with hammers because they think they're violating the sanctity of the sun god. What does the rest of the world looking onto these events taking place in India have to say about it?
Well, I think, this is a capitalist world where India is just being seen as a market. Come what may, we are talking, the world understands what is happening. The international community understands what's happening there. There are 200 million people who are the low castes in India. 200 million people.
That's a quarter of the population. That's the
and equal to the Pakistan's population. Right. So these are the minorities and the Dalits. And I was just reading this Al Jazeera's report. And what the top court in India said that all the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes, those who are involved against crimes against those, they will get the bail or they will not be arrested immediately. The point is more than 150,000 cases are pending whose trial has not been started in Indian courts, and that is 90% of the cases against the minorities. So this is actually, a structural imbalance or a structural violence. You may say that a structural marginalization of 200 million people is happening. This is what is happening inside India. Those who are actually the people who are inside India, and then you come to these Indian occupied Kashmir. I think the word is silent. All those while knowing that this is a democratic army. This is an army that carries the highest badge that we are the largest democracy on earth, and then they are doing all these atrocities. And then they look at Kashmir and they say, look, since this is bilateral issue between India and Pakistan, so let's be silent on it. And looking at Pakistan's position globally, which has been compromised on many areas, although Pakistan's government or Pakistan's cabinet is going Kashmir on 6th, and we are sending our emissaries once again. We sent last time in 2016, and then we forgot to follow the story. And then we are sending those again after 2-3 years to tell the world, look, there is happening something in Kashmir. So India's strength, our weakness in pursuing the case, although we have been pursuing it, but the way we should pursue, because we actually carry this mantle that this is the Kashmir seeks attention, but we are not doing that what we could do or what we should have done. So if anywhere we can put attention, if anywhere we can drag international community's attention, I think this is a very volatile position in Kashmir. This is a case which we can we can just have the international community's attention, because if there are any global violations or humanitarian violations, or all those liberal internationalists who basically believe in humanitarianism, I think if they just look into what's happening inside Kashmir or inside India, I think this is a sheer violation of international humanitarian law, and nobody just speaks on that. For example, in the morning, I was just saying that Hafiz's Milli Muslim League has been banned by the United States State Department. That is a sort of a pressure, although Pakistan has not registered that organization. That has not been registered as per the laws of Pakistani authorities. Pakistan's Interior Ministry has not given them NOC. But looking at the pressure they carry globally, I think this is where Pakistan need to be more active and effective, and we have to be more strong in asserting the case. I think there is no language which the international community understand, the language of human rights. That is the only language which I think those United Nations building and all those people who carry this the debate on the world order and this global understanding of human rights, they don't understand better than what is human rights violations. If that is the language they understand, I think this is what that needs to be told. This is what the world must understood, that this structural violence or structural marginalization is not just about the it's about the Kashmiris. It's also about the minorities. There are 200 million people in Kashmir, and I think this is where we need to expose the mindset of Bharatiya Janata Party. This is where we have to expose that this is basically a mindset, a particular school of thought, Jingoism. Talking about Jingoism, Hindu nationalism, chauvinism.
Is there any difference, Raja Saab, between the narrative that the BJP government and Mr. Modi's government is now basically narrating across all medias, is any different from what was happening to the Jews during the time of the Holocaust? And is there any difference between the behavior of Hitler and Mr. Modi when it comes to dealing with minorities within India, whether they be Dalits, whether they be Muslims or Christians or Buddhists or any other?
To answer this question, Waqas, we first need to understand the ideological and the cognitive disposition of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The person who was termed and named for very obvious reasons as Butcher.
Butcher of Gujarat.
Yeah, Butcher of Gujarat.
He was refused entry into the US at one time.
The one who was refused an entry into the United States. Plus, the commission which was formed indicted him into that mass murder and that mass carnage of the people.
But the courts set him free for that.
Recently, when he became the Prime Minister,
the courts decided that he was innocent.
Yeah, that he was innocent. Plus,
which also is a huge statement and a question mark on the functioning of courts or the judicial system in India itself.
Yeah, very true. But Waqas, like Cheema Sahab was pointing out, this needs to be reflected upon, and this needs to be pondered upon, that why international community turns a deaf ear towards the plight of the Muslims in Kashmir particularly, and in India as well. So, for instance, let's juxtapose this event to the happenings, what happened when this balkanization of the Yugoslavia took place. And then 6 countries, Macedonia, Montenegro, this Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia and Kosovo, they came out as the splinter countries of that balkanization. So there this ethnic violence and ethnic cleansing erupted as a major and a very mammoth kind of challenge towards the international community. By then, international community, it resorted to make a Badinter commission to investigate what can be done, and subsequently
those war criminals were punished.
Yeah, war criminals. In the president of the Serbia, he was warned for not committing atrocities towards the Kosovian Albanians, but eventually that led to a humanitarian intervention, and that led to the formation of international administration in Kosovo. So I really fail to figure out, or I get taken aback when I see the plight of Kashmiris and see the deaf ear approach or completely numb and dumb response of the international community. The issue is equally challenging. It is the human rights violations, blatant human rights violations and misadumbrated and misrepresented represented as a bilateral issue. International community, like you know, its application of this human rights law is pretty dichotomous, and we have seen it before. You know, when there is an interest, or when there is it is moved by some kind of impetus where there is any significant gain, so then you can see international law pretty, you know, on the move. Yeah, taking into action and coming into the move. But when you see the plight of a common man, like be it in the Myanmar or be it in the Kashmir, it remains unnoticed. You know, they were pretty exigent to enter into Syria over the use of the chemical weapons, and they were pretty perturbed to go into Libya because of the despot.
Iraq, for that matter, for the non-existent WMDs that they had.
Yeah, so you know, its international community is riddled with these kind of paradoxes, and which eventually shrinks and dwindles the faith of the people, or the belief of the people in these kind of so-called norms and values being presented as some kind of law or regime. India, as I was pointing out earlier, and what I'm fearing and what I'm foreseeing it, you know, it will end up as a more narrow and a more parochial society, and it won't be even out of the expectation, or I'm not blowing it out of the proposition, but it is also a possibility that Indian secularism, though it's already very, you know, fragile, and it is a double standard, this secularism, but India may abandon this in the longer run. Reason being, the way Modi and its aides and the way its allies and its ideologues of the BJP, the way they are, you know, they are appearing as monsters right now. They want a Hindu-dominant, Hindu majority polity, plus at the same time they don't want to acknowledge the right of the people to live as the minorities.
Absolutely.
It's even more depressing and upsetting.
Raja Sahab, there's something even much more worrying than what you're articulating. Cheema Sahab, what do you think about this sort of a scenario unfolding? Because India is now witnessing riots all across the country, especially the northern part of India, as a result of the discrimination that is being meted out towards the Dalits and minorities in India. Obviously, with the internal aspect of the implosion that Raja Sahab is talking about, we also have the external aspect, which is that sort of a violence spilling out across the borders of India. We're talking about using that violence in order to, or diverting attention from the internal issues of Indian polity, and trying to divert attention by maybe upping the ante on the line of control and the working boundary. There are also fears that they might try to divert the attention of the population by engaging in a sort of a war with Pakistan. So these are real, you know, concerns. And if that happens, things are going to spiral completely out of control. It would be a very, very dangerous situation that would arise out of that. Do you agree with this sort of a perception? Do you think that the Modi government is playing with fire right now?
Well, I think what is happening inside India, for example, if all the cases that have been that are coming from the scheduled caste or the scheduled tribes against the state and the society, and less than 10% of the cases have been considered as false. So it means every case that is being registered against the government or the Hindus by those minorities, that is the true case. So in this shape, for example, how much they can divert that attention towards LOC or on Kashmir, I think they won't.
Because the BJP government is also hoping to win the elections when the time comes, and this could also be a sort of a ploy to gather, you know, sympathetic Hindutva votes, or trying to, you know, perpetuate the Hindu sort of myth, or I have no idea really at the end of the day. What are they trying to achieve?
I think it's overall basically the structure of the society. It's just not about those people. For example, every crime among those minorities, it is not just about the Muslims. There are Christians, there are other minorities which are being persecuted. So I think if yes, definitely they divert the attention on LOC, they accuse Pakistan, and then Pakistan and India, you know, trade hot words, and things go out of the proportion, and things are not escalate. So that is fine. But I think what is happening inside India, perhaps I don't find that that could be marketed globally as the weakness of India, because this is how we have to exploit the situation in India if something is happening inside. And I think it cannot be, you know, the shining India anymore. In case what Raja Saab was mentioning earlier, that basically Hindutva mindset, basically which is not letting the secular society to have everyone, or it's not embracing everyone. So all what I think matters at the moment is that Pakistan should keep its position on Kashmir, a consistent position, a position where the world understand that this is the real cause, and a position where it is understood that this cause is not of particularly of the few quarters in this country, but actually the state leads this issue, and that is where we can make the world understand. And I think, as I was mentioning, it's not about the humanitarian. For example, I have a report, this Committee to Protect Journalists. The journalists since 1992, majority
have been systematically murdered.
Murdered, and all those journalists who have been murdered, there is no single conviction of that, no single conviction. So it means that, for example, if those minorities who are showing distrust or mistrust on the top court of the India, or the top court of the country, and they're showing that mistrust, and then the journalists who are being murdered, and they're being murdered most of the time by the Hindu nationalists, because they're not doing their line, and majority of the journalists who are doing corruption, following the corruption stories and doing follow-ups on all that, they have been killed and murdered. So I think it's not about, you just cannot put everything on an LOC. You have to look inward, and as Raja was also mentioning, the things will explode one day. But I think at the moment, the world doesn't look inside, or the world is not looking at the bad face of India. The world understand all that bad face. We have to correct it by going inside and making this, or taking this as a market. So India is a major global financial destination. So everybody is putting money there, and when they go into the New Delhi, the government and the authorities are asking.
I think that investment and the money that is being put in is going to be in great jeopardy because of the way the Indian government is now acting. Raja Saab, the question that I was asking Cheema Saab as well, if you'd like to also share your point of view, that we have a scenario where it's developing, but Mr. Modi's government has a strategy of diverting the attention from India's internal mess towards its borders, especially its neighbors, and that would be the first target would be Pakistan.
Waqas, first let me respond to the preceding conversation. The plight of Indian minorities cannot be understood without having known the Mandal Commission, which was set up in 1979 by the Morarji Desai government, the then Janata Party. This BJP is the splinter group of that Janata Party. This, Mandal Commission, BP Mandal was the chief, the justice, who headed this commission. It was meant to identify the backward classes. In India, there is one very famous term and phrase, OBCs, or other backward classes. So these, they took 11 indicators to identify that who stand into these other backward classes and scheduled castes, like Cheema Saab was pointing out. And the recommendations and the findings of the commissions, they were almost dastardly, because it identified 51% of the Indian population by then as hailing from OBCs, and it recommended 27% of the job shares and non-discriminatory affirmative actions to uplift the status of the minorities in India. What is even more unfortunate and ironical is that this Mandal Commission has not been applied, which was by this party, Janata Party, has not been implemented in its letter and spirit as of today. Secondly, there is a theory in international relations we often refer to as system survival theory, that you create an external monster to divert the attention from the real-time issues, like Stalin did in the form of the Cold War, like when he was facing extreme kind of devastation by the end of the World War II, and he feared that people may stand and resist against the communist regime in Russia. So he created kind of an external enemy in the form of United States of America. One of the proposed theories, or one of the possible explanations of the start of the Cold War. India is successfully doing this over the years. India creates a kind of a major hawks that supersedes the existing real-time situations. You see, did you notice one thing, and that has become more ubiquitous and a vibrant phenomena right now, and that is whensoever there the consternation in Kashmir, it starts, the firing and the line of control and the border violations, they become the rife phenomena. So that is how India diverts the attention from that thing, and India basically tries to pretend or conveys a message as if it is an externally orchestrated kind of disturbance, and it has got nothing to do with the indigenous repulsion which the people of the Kashmir are facing towards the atrocities and towards a very cruel and a pathetic administration mandated under FSPA and POTA. So that's how India it does it. Plus, India also, I totally agree to this argumentation of Cheema Saab that India is presumed as a market and nothing beyond than that. Rest of the world is not interested, these civilizational constructs and this culture of India, and this is all rubbish, nonsense. World is not interested in this thing anymore. World is interested about money, capitalism, cheap labor, and plus in access to a consumerist market, 1.5 billion people, and it stands as the world's largest market. So this is the point of attraction, and international community would stand still, it will follow an impasse, and it will remain completely,
oblivious
and tight-lipped unless and until, this phenomena of capitalism remains intact. What is, apparently more upsetting is that there seems no way out right now. India seems further dogged into this mess, and what I am foreseeing, being again a modest reader of Indian politics, is seeing an outright victory of BJP again in 2019. Political pundits may disagree to my proposition, but this Modi factor and this Hindutva is consolidating. This Hindu chauvinism is consolidating its bases into the nook and cranny of India. You can see this kind of communal violence erupting almost everywhere on every side of India, not necessarily against the Muslims as well, but towards other minorities as well. Christians, even Dalits, and many other these castes and minorities, they are subjected and victim to this kind of virulent and violent acts and which are getting manifested. Plus, you see BJP is sweeping across all those states where it didn't have any presence before. You see, if you see at the elections, recent state elections in Tripura, and then in Himachal Pradesh, so you would come across this thing, that
most surprisingly in UP itself, which has a Muslim majority.
But that was back in 2016. But towards the end of the 16. But right now, this in Tripura, where it was, this Communist Party of India's government for past 3 decades. So it was, very surprising in many ways. Plus in Himachal Pradesh, where it was Congress government before, and now BJP is taking the seat over there as well. So this it's not only BJP, but it's Hindu nationalism and its violent manifestation, which is spewing across and sweeping across India right now, and this phenomena is getting further abated. That you see the rise of right and conservative politics almost everywhere. This is becoming a global phenomenon, the rise of populism and conservatism and hate politics. You see President Trump, you see Narendra Modi winning in India, and plus you also see, if you see the elections in Netherlands, though the guy lost the elections but had a significant vote, and if you see the percentage of the votes which these hate mongers got in Germany, and very recently on 3rd of April, the kind of that hawks of Punish a Muslim Day in England.
And not only that, but the Canadians have also now made a huge fund in order to fight racism and bigotry within the Canadian
and in Australia as well, it is emerging as a daunting challenge, this racism.
That's right. Now the funny thing is that this entire mindset, whether it be white supremacists or Christian crusaders or Hindutva or Taliban for that matter, all of these people, they share the same kind of a mindset. There is nothing different between what they profess and the way they want to achieve their goals. If you would like to say anything about that, Cheema Saab, that why is this happening? Why is the physical and psychological abuse continuing on innocent civilians? Whether we're seeing this phenomena rising all over the world, but specifically more in third world countries such as India.
Well, I think personally in this cause, I believe that the modes of communication are not in our control. For example, if we have to talk about the Hindu nationalism, and we have to talk about what's happening, the racism issues in Australia or America, and how the black movement was started. I think those who are at the helm of the affairs, we don't have those means. For example, you just look at one thing. How many television talk shows in Pakistan are on Kashmir problem? For example, I was just going through the PAMRA report. There were more than 3,500 cases on Panama Papers. And there were just 300 few talk shows on Kashmir issue. The question is how we project that particular problem. So as far as the Kashmir issue is talking, I think we need to look inward in that. And at the same time, how much can we market that particular problem? For example, if there are humanitarian violation in Kashmir, are we in a position? How many talk the Pakistani authorities have talked with the Human Rights Watch or the Amnesty International or the global human rights arms around the world? How many times we talk in the United Nations, and how many times we went to the Vienna for talking on that? So I think there is a problem inside. Globally, yes, for example, these Arabs and the Turks and among the Muslim world, they are coming up with the new global media forums, and they are trying to project their stories, looking at, for example, how Al Jazeera has taken the lead on them, and now coming up with the alternative media wings they are building. So that is where I think the Pakistan we have to project our case. For example, if the world need to listen what is happening in Pakistan, there is only one single television channel where we are sitting right now. And it is giving its voice, it is speaking, it's telling how the Indian brutalities are going on. From Pakistan, if they have to listen, and we are the country who's involved in terrorism, extremism, and the world is looking at us, and we are considered, what not globally. So, but if we have to project our case, we can't project our case. So as you are mentioning that if there is Hindu nationalism or that mindset in India, and the way they're treating with the minorities and the Muslims and everyone, how we can project it to the world, I think all what we have to do is that we need to have those resources. For example, I think I mentioned it earlier that Donald Rumsfeld said that we cannot win the war in Afghanistan, in the mountains of Afghanistan, or the war in Iraq, in the streets of Iraq. We have to win that war in the newsrooms of London, New York, and Cairo. That is where the wars have been won. So we need to build a narrative on those particular issues. So humanitarian problem, Kashmir is a very classical example that how the human rights violations are being conducted. The children, minorities, the issue of the half widows.
I'd just like to share this statement. I'd like to share. You must be sad today. Your brothers were martyred, said an Indian army soldier directing a bright torchlight into the faces of some citizens of Kashmir. This is what is happening. Raja Sahab, when you have a systematic psychological disorder, not only are the Indians going around and killing the loved ones of Kashmiris, but they're also taunting them about the fact. Now, is there no humanitarian law? There is no humanitarian organization that can take cognizance of this kind of abuse that is taking place in India, in Indian-held Kashmir?
Well, India has resorted to use mass murders, rapes, humiliations, and destruction of property as the part of their wartime strategy in Kashmir. They should not be considered as the sporadic events, or they should not be considered as off and on happenings. This is the part of their strategy. This is the part how this is how they approach to this war, and this is something on which they have a consensual agreement on doing this thing. This is how Indian Army is working over there. This is the modus operandi of Indian Army right now in Kashmir. What needs to be done, Raja Sahab?
What do we need to do in order to wake up the sleeping conscience of the entire international community?
I have a slight of a disagreement to what Cheema Saab was saying earlier on. It's not, when Pakistan, goes an extra mile in projecting this issue or the violations in Kashmir. So it actually in one or other way strengthens India's perspective that it is a bilateral issue, that it is an issue of significance between two countries, and then they refer to the similar treaty. And as per international law, the most the treaty which is the most relevant one, or which is concluded towards towards the end of in the timeline, holds more precedence over what had taken place before. So what Pakistan needs to do right now is to empower the local Kashmiri leadership. And if Pakistan is up to send delegations to the rest of the countries, Pakistan should make it sure that the local leadership from Kashmir side, if not from that side of the border, because India has not eased the travel restrictions on the Kashmiri leadership, and they are under a continuous siege for past 3-4 years after this Modi is in power. But academic intelligentsia from Kashmir, the Kashmiri diaspora across the globe, plus Pakistani missions everywhere in the world, they should rather play a proactive role in representing it, in adumbrating it as an issue of human rights violations. You see, this doctrine of national self-determination, it is enshrined into UN's basic charter. Pakistan should make that as a base. And plus in your last program, I had my contention, and I still repeat that here, where had been we doing, our point of flaw, our faulty parallelism was that we had always been approaching the issues of legal significance through bureaucrats. A bureaucrat is meant to train in a very different way. He has his own constraints on decision making, his own limitations, and is trained to think in a very predisposed way. But unless and until we don't have the lobbyists, we don't have the competent international lawyers who could present our case in a way that it is the issue of the human rights violations. It is not a bilateral issue, it is not the issue of significance between two countries, but it is the issue of human lives, it is the issue of human rights abuses, it is the issue of rapes, and it is the issue of ethnic cleansing. It is a genocide which is taking place right now in Kashmir, and ethnic cleansing is something over which international community has adopted different statutes, different conventions. We need to actually follow that course of action. Just merely issuing a lip service to this cause and issuing a press statement and doing a few odd shows not into the prime time, that too will not serve the purpose. The plight of Kashmiris is even more than that what is right now getting represented through our media outlets. Kashmir right now is burning, it is at the keg powders, it is sitting right now on the tenterhooks, and probably this is the time where we need to put our entire weight behind Kashmiri struggle, and we need to support them diplomatically, we need to support them morally to fight this thing. And I here refer to one of the very finest articles I read in the recent times. It was written by the guy whose name is Bisharat Peer, and the article was published in New York Times, and the guy is the same one who wrote the script of the Haider movie, and he is also the writer of a very famous novel, The Curfewed Nights, and he himself hails from that valley. The argument of the article was very compelling and convincing. He said, well, for instance, we accept for a moment that guns were given to us by Pakistan, and this militant struggle was fomented by Pakistan, but what about stones? Aren't they our own? So this stone pelting and this stone throwing, didn't it show, didn't it make India to introspect for a while that this resistance is genuine, because they are not getting exported or imported by any other country to Kashmir. They are their own, they are indigenous. So in itself speaks volume of this fact that this resentment, this kind of aggrievement is real, and it is genuine, and it is indigenous. So unless and until, you know, Pakistan won't play its role in the diplomatic execution of this thing, or we take this to the next level through our proactive diplomacy. Unfortunately, our diplomatic capital had been pretty obscurant and pretty blaze, and we had never been able to portray our case or brand our case internationally in a convincing manner. For instance, I really believe that the situation which erupted in the aftermath of the Burhan Wani's martyrdom was very conducive. The international community, since, as I said earlier, that I being the reader of the Indian politics, I kept on watching all these news and media outlets. That was the time where New York Times, BBC, Reuters, all of them, they started writing editorials on Kashmir. You know, that was the heat of the moment. Probably we lost that heat of the moment amid a political turmoil at our home.
Of course, many of the problems that are external, that have to be dealt with Pakistan, are unfortunately laid at the altar of internal dissension and internal politicking, and we have lost out many opportunities because of that. Cheema Saab, is there any way that we can overcome our own internal problems, get together on this one point where everybody agrees and not politicize it, and rather work with a single determination to achieve the goal, which is to make Kashmir a part of Pakistan, which it is?
Well, I think I would just second Raja Saab's position that we have to empower the locals there. That is one very strong way to actually strengthen the Kashmir cause, one. Second, at the same time, definitely this Kashmir issue is clubbed with Pakistan, definitely. So all what we can do is that we have to be consistent in our approach. We have been talking on in Kashmir since Burhan Wani's incident. We lack this consistency. And if there is no consistency, the word actually at one point they understand this is not their cause. For example, when we do not have the third party even in Kashmir for the Kashmir cause, to discuss Kashmir cause, actually India's strong position has actually, it has brought the absence of third party in this. And with the absence of third party, India has got more strength, it has got more power, and it is now just in a position that they do not listen to anyone. So India is not that mature country to be given that much strength in the region to play and to act single-handedly and with that confidence, because it has its own historical and structural biases against its neighbors, which the international community just cannot ignore. So I think that is where, in looking at this situation and looking at the great powers' departure from the region, particularly on this long-standing nuclear conflict, I think this is where Pakistan would have to be consistent and just follow those particular norms and values which the international community understand, which those groups understand globally. If, for example, look, how they're trying to portray the situation, internal situation in Pakistan on the global capitals. That is where we have to portray the situation. I think
and it's not even a matter of portrayal. It is a matter of just stating the facts.
And one more thing, I would say one more thing. Even if we talk to the international community, the members of the international community in Islamabad, and they talk about Kashmir problem, and what is the reaction? Oh, this is bilateral, India, Pakistan, old issue, and that is not going to be resolved.
That is an excuse of passing the buck, basically.
One thing, at the same time, our approach not being consistent also, shows that particular attitude of theirs.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for taking out the time and sharing your views with PTV World. We leave it at that for the moment, but obviously this is something that is going to be a topic of discussion for many weeks and months to come. Well, you heard the conversation, and in conclusion, we'd like to say that you may draw your own conclusions from what you've heard, but facts speak louder than anything else. And the facts on the ground say that the Indian BJP government led by Mr. Modi is a draconian government which is killing its own citizens, and the entire world needs to wake up and smell the coffee when it comes to dealing with India. And we hope, and on that note, it's goodbye.